She was America's sweetheart, the Rhinestone Queen, the woman who turned a Tennessee holler into a billion-dollar empire and made the whole world love her doing it. But behind the glitter and the wigs and that unforgettable smile, Dolly Parton built something so vast, so complicated, and so carefully guarded that when she died, it didn't just break hearts. It apparently caught the attention of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and what they found inside that estate is deeply, deeply disturbing. Who was Dolly Parton? Really? Here's the thing about Dolly Parton. Everybody thinks they know her, and that's exactly how she wanted it. She was born on January 19, 1946, in a one-room cabin in Locust Ridge, Tennessee. The fourth of 12 children born to Robert Lee Parton and Avie Lee Caroline Owens. Her daddy paid the doctor who delivered her with a sack of cornmeal. A sack of cornmeal. Let that sink in for a second. The woman who would one day be worth more than $600 million arrived in this world, traded for a bag of grain. Growing up dirt poor in the Smoky Mountains didn't break Dolly Parton. It built her. She sang in church before she could properly read. She performed on local Knoxville television at 10 years old. And the day after she graduated from Sevier County High School in 1964, she packed a single cardboard suitcase and got on a bus to Nashville. She was 18 years old. She didn't look back once. Now, most people know the broad strokes of what happened next. She signed with Monument Records. She caught the ear of country legend Porter Wagoner, who invited her to join his syndicated television show in 1967. For 7 years, they were one of country music's most iconic duos. They sang together, they toured together, they fought together. And when Dolly finally decided she was too big for anyone else's stage, she wrote him a song to say goodbye. That song was I Will Always Love You. Written not for a romantic partner, but for a business partner she was leaving behind. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about how Dolly Parton's mind worked, nothing will. By the late 1970s, she had crossed over into pop. 9 to 5 came out in 1980, and it wasn't just a hit. It was a cultural earthquake. The woman could write, perform, produce, and charm the paint off a barn wall simultaneously. Hollywood came calling. Awards shows came calling. The whole world came calling. But here is what the world didn't fully appreciate while Dolly was alive and laughing and posing for pictures. Dolly Parton was not just a singer, she was a corporation, a carefully constructed, meticulously managed empire that stretched far beyond anything her fans in the cheap seats ever imagined. And it was the sheer size and complexity of that empire that would eventually make it a target. Because when you build something that big, and you guard it that closely, and you keep certain things just out of the public's reach for decades, eventually somebody starts asking questions. And in this case, that somebody carried a badge. The business empire. Nobody talks about people love to talk about Dolly's voice, her sense of humor, her wigs, and honestly, fair enough on all counts. But if you want to understand why federal investigators would ever turn their attention toward her estate, you first have to understand the staggering scale of what she built. Let's start with Dollywood, because that's the one most people know. The theme park in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, opened in 1986 when Dolly partnered with the Hershin Family Entertainment Corporation to transform a struggling attraction called Silver Dollar City into something spectacular. And spectacular it became. By the time of her death, Dollywood had grown into a multi-park resort empire, drawing more than 3 million visitors every single year. It employed thousands of people. It generated hundreds of millions of dollars in annual revenue. It was the economic engine of the entire Great Smoky Mountains region. The governor of Tennessee didn't just like Dolly Parton. He needed her. But Dollywood was really just the most visible piece of the puzzle. What most people never fully grasped was Dolly's publishing empire. Now, for those of you who don't live and breathe the music industry, let me explain something real quick. In the world of music, owning the publishing rights to a song is where the real generational wealth lives. Every time a song gets played on the radio, streamed, licensed for a movie, used in a commercial, covered by another artist, the publisher gets paid. Dolly Parton owned the publishing rights to an enormous catalog of her own songs. And she was smart about it in ways that made Nashville veterans shake their heads in admiration. When Whitney Houston recorded I Will Always Love You for the Bodyguard soundtrack in 1992, and it became arguably the greatest pop vocal performance in recorded history, Dolly Parton reportedly earned more than $6 million in royalties from that one song alone. She famously joked that she cried all the way to the bank. And knowing Dolly, she absolutely did. And she was absolutely not joking about the bank part. Beyond publishing, there were real estate holdings, significant ones. Properties in Tennessee and California, and in other locations that were not all publicly disclosed during her lifetime. There were production company interests, television and film development deals, charitable foundations with significant endowments. The Imagination Library, her beloved literacy program that mailed free books to children from birth until they started school, had grown into an international operation, funding millions of books annually. That organization alone had a financial infrastructure that was anything but simple. And then there were the private business arrangements, the handshake deals and the quiet partnerships and the financial structures that Dolly and her team had constructed over decades in the very particular way that self-made people from poor backgrounds tend to construct their finances, which is to say, carefully, privately, and with a deep distrust of letting too many outside eyes anywhere near the numbers. That distrust of outside eyes, by the way, is completely understandable given where she came from. When you grew up trading a newborn baby for a bag of cornmeal, you tend to hold your assets pretty close to your chest. But holding things close to your chest, it turns out, can create some very significant problems when you're gone. The people closest to her, now. Here is where things start to get complicated. And I mean really complicated. The kind of complicated that keeps estate attorneys billing hours for years. Dolly Parton married Carl Thomas Dean on May 30th, 1966. He was an asphalt paving businessman from Nashville, which, honestly, is the most perfectly un-Dolly profession imaginable. The woman wore rhinestones to breakfast, and her husband paved parking lots. And somehow, it was the greatest love story in country music history. Go figure. Carl Dean was famously private, legendarily so. The man avoided cameras the way most people avoid jury duty. He attended almost none of her public events. He gave almost no interviews over the course of their entire marriage. By every available account, he was a deeply decent and deeply quiet man who loved his wife completely and wanted absolutely nothing to do with the circus that surrounded her. In nearly 6 decades of marriage, he let Dolly be Dolly, and she let him be Carl, and apparently that was exactly enough for both of them. They had no children together. Dolly has spoken about this tenderly over the years, suggesting that God perhaps intended her children to be the millions of kids she reached through the Imagination Library and through her music. It is a genuinely beautiful sentiment. It is also, from a purely legal standpoint, a situation that makes estate planning significantly more complicated. When there are no direct heirs waiting in an obvious line of succession, the question of who gets what becomes a conversation that involves a great many more people with a great many more opinions. And Dolly had a lot of people in her life with opinions. She was extraordinarily close to her siblings, 11 of them, remember. That is not a family. That is a small congressional delegation. Several had worked with her professionally over the years in various capacities. Her brother Randy Parton built his own performing career. Her sister Stella Parton carved out a genuine name for herself in country music. Other members of the Parton family had been woven into the business empire in ways both large and small across the decades. Dolly was generous with her family, almost extravagantly so. The girl who grew up with nothing never forgot what nothing felt like, and she spent the rest of her life making sure the people she loved didn't feel it either. But here is the hard truth about generosity. When it operates at that scale, across that many people, over that many years, without airtight documentation at every step, it does not just create warmth, it creates disputes. Serious, expensive, legally complex disputes about who was promised what and when, and whether any of it was ever properly written down. Then there was the professional inner circle. The managers, attorneys, accountants, and business partners who had spent years, some of them decades, operating at the very center of the Dolly Parton enterprise. These were people with extraordinary institutional knowledge. They knew where things were. They knew what things were worth. They knew how the various pieces connected to each other in ways that nobody on the outside could fully map. They had access that almost nobody else had. And in the final years of her life, as Dolly's health made day-to-day management more difficult, certain roles quietly expanded. Certain arrangements were quietly updated. Certain decisions were made that not everyone in the inner circle knew about at the same time. That right there. That combination of enormous wealth, overlapping family claims, powerful professional insiders, and a growing culture of quiet decisions made behind closed doors. That is not just the recipe for a messy estate. That is the recipe for something far worse. What triggered the investigation? All right, so here's where we get into the heart of it. And I want to be careful here because this is serious. This is not gossip. This is not tabloid chatter. We are talking about a federal investigation into one of the most beloved estates in American entertainment history. So, let's walk through what is known about how this started and why. In the months following Dolly Parton's death, the normal legal machinery surrounding a major estate began to grind into motion. Attorneys filed documents. Assets were inventoried. Claims were made. This is all standard. This is what happens when anyone with significant wealth passes away. It's not glamorous, but it is necessary. What was not standard was what started emerging during that process. According to sources familiar with the situation, discrepancies began appearing in the financial records associated with certain portions of the estate. Not small discrepancies, not the kind of rounding errors and clerical mistakes that any large financial operation might generate over time. Significant discrepancies, the kind that made attorneys stop mid-sentence and reach for the phone. Specifically, investigators began examining the movement of funds connected to several of Dolly's business entities in the period stretching back several years before her death. What they were looking at, according to people with knowledge of the probe, was whether assets had been systematically moved, restructured, or in some cases simply disappeared from the estate in ways that were not authorized, not properly documented, and not in accordance with what Dolly herself had directed. Now, that is a very specific and very serious allegation, and it points towards something that investigators have a very specific word for: fraud. There were also questions raised about certain contractual arrangements that had been executed in the final period of Dolly's life. Arrangements that insiders say did not reflect her wishes as she had previously expressed them. Arrangements that benefited specific individuals in ways that seemed, to put it charitably, highly convenient given the timing. The FBI does not typically insert itself into estate disputes. That's the domain of civil courts and probate attorneys. When federal investigators get involved, it means someone believes that what happened crossed a line from messy and unfortunate into criminal. And the involvement of the FBI in the examination of Dolly Parton's estate sent a shockwave through Nashville and through the broader entertainment business community that has not fully subsided. Think about what it takes to get the FBI interested. We are not talking about a family squabble over grandmother's china cabinet. We are talking about allegations serious enough and evidence preliminary enough to justify the involvement of federal law enforcement in an estate that touches not just private wealth, but charitable organizations, business partnerships, employment for thousands of people, and the legacy of a woman who was, for all practical purposes, a national institution. There are people in Nashville right now who will not return certain phone calls, and that tells you something all by itself. The estate battle nobody saw coming here is something that everyone who followed Dolly Parton's career assumed. They assumed that when she died, her affairs would be in perfect order, because that was Dolly, prepared, professional, on top of everything. The woman who negotiated her own publishing deals in an era when most female artists were told to smile and sign whatever was put in front of them. The woman who held onto the rights to her own music when every industry pressure pushed her to give them up. Nobody expected chaos. Nobody expected lawyers. Nobody expected the word investigation to appear anywhere near Dolly Parton's name after her death. And yet, here we are. The estate battle that emerged following her passing involved multiple competing claims from multiple directions simultaneously. There were family members who believed that certain arrangements made in the final years did not reflect Dolly's true intentions. There were business partners who disputed the valuation of shared assets. There were charitable entities whose futures were suddenly unclear because the financial structures supporting them were now under scrutiny. And then there was the question of the will itself. Dolly Parton, being Dolly Parton, had of course executed a will. Multiple versions of it over the years, in fact, as any responsible person with significant assets should. But like many things surrounding her estate, the details of exactly what that will said, and whether the version ultimately presented for probate accurately reflected her most recent and fully informed wishes, became a matter of profound and heated dispute. Sources indicate that at least one prior version of Dolly's will contained provisions that differed materially from the version that surfaced after her death, specifically regarding the disposition of certain intellectual property rights and the oversight structure of her charitable foundation. Whether those differences reflected a genuine change of heart on Dolly's part, or whether they reflected something more troubling, is precisely what investigators have been working to determine. There were also questions about the role of certain individuals who had been granted power of attorney over portions of Dolly's affairs during a period when her health had made day-to-day management difficult. Power of attorney is a legal instrument that, when properly used, protects vulnerable people. When improperly used, it is one of the most common tools in financial elder abuse cases. That phrase, financial elder abuse, is an ugly one. It is an especially ugly one when the name next to it is Dolly Parton. But investigators do not get to choose which names appear in their case files. They only get to follow the evidence. And the evidence, according to those with knowledge of the investigation, led them to some very specific places and some very specific people. The disturbing details. I have to be honest with you for a second. When I first started pulling on this thread, I expected to find the usual stuff. Squabbling relatives, disputed valuations, cousins coming out of the woodwork, claiming Dolly once promised them something at a family barbecue in 1983. That kind of thing is unfortunate, sure, but it is not shocking. It happens every single time enormous wealth changes hands, and it usually just means a lot of billable hours for a lot of attorneys until everybody gets tired and settles. That is what I expected to find. What actually started coming to light was something else entirely. According to sources familiar with the investigation, federal investigators began examining a pattern of financial transactions that spanned several years and touched multiple entities connected to the Parton business empire. Not one transaction, not one account. A pattern, spread across time, spread across multiple parts of the organization. The kind of pattern that does not emerge from sloppy bookkeeping or innocent mistakes. The kind of pattern that suggests somebody knew exactly what they were doing and did it deliberately and repeatedly over an extended period of time. What investigators were specifically trying to determine was whether funds from certain business accounts had been redirected, moved, in amounts large enough to be genuinely significant, but broken up and structured in ways specifically designed to avoid triggering the automatic federal financial reporting requirements that exist precisely to catch this kind of thing. Banks are required by law to report certain transactions above specific thresholds. Everybody in finance knows this. And deliberately breaking up transactions to stay below those thresholds so the reports never get filed is not a clever workaround. It has a name. The name is structuring. And structuring is a federal crime. Full stop. Now, I want to be precise here, because precision matters when we are talking about allegations this serious. Investigators examining a pattern of transactions is not the same thing as proving that crimes were committed. An ongoing investigation is not a conviction. As of right now, no criminal charges have been publicly filed in connection with the Parton estate. What we know is that federal investigators looked at this situation and found it serious enough to investigate. And then they kept investigating. And in the language of federal law enforcement, that means something. But here's the part that stopped me cold. Because the financial irregularities in the business accounts, as serious as those are, were not even the most disturbing element of what investigators reportedly found. The Imagination Library, Dolly's literacy charity, the one she built from scratch, the one that mailed free books every single month to children from the day they were born until the day they started school. The one that had grown from a small Tennessee program into an international operation, sending millions of books annually to children in multiple countries. The one that Dolly herself said was among the things she was proudest of in her entire life. The one that carries her name and her face and her fundamental promise to children who cannot yet read that somebody out there believes they are worth investing in. Investigators reportedly examined the financial flows moving in and out of that charitable organization to determine whether funds designated for the library's actual programs had been managed in accordance with the legal obligations that govern nonprofit organizations. Because charitable organizations are not just morally obligated to use donated funds properly, they are legally obligated. Deviation from those obligations is not a technicality, it is fraud. I will be straight with you. That part made me angry in a way the business account stuff did not. You want to fight over who gets the music catalog? Fine. Lawyers exist for exactly that purpose. But the children's literacy charity, the free books program, that is a line that should not exist anywhere near this story. And yet, here we are. Sources also indicate investigators examined specific real estate transactions involving properties connected to the estate, properties transferred or sold in the window surrounding Dolly's death, at prices and under circumstances that raise serious questions about whether those deals were conducted honestly and in the genuine interest of the estate. Plain English version. It looks like certain people may have acquired things they had no business acquiring, at prices nobody with clean hands would have accepted, from an estate that deserved a great deal better than what it apparently got. The industry reacts. Nashville is a small town wearing a big city's clothes. And in a small town, everybody knows everything eventually. The country music industry is built on relationships, on handshakes, on loyalty, and on a shared understanding that certain things simply do not get discussed publicly unless they absolutely have to be. The reaction from Nashville's establishment to the news of a federal investigation into Dolly Parton's estate was, in the most revealing possible way, almost complete silence. And silence in Nashville is deafening. Artists who had worked with Dolly for decades suddenly became very hard to reach for comment. Industry veterans who had been happy to speak glowingly about her legacy when she was alive suddenly had scheduling conflicts when reporters came calling. Label executives who had publicly mourned her passing with lengthy and eloquent tributes became remarkably tight-lipped once the word investigation entered the conversation. This is not because these people didn't love Dolly Parton. Most of them genuinely did. This is because in Nashville, as in most places where significant money and business relationships intersect, people understand very quickly when a situation has the potential to splash onto everyone nearby. And nobody wanted to be standing too close to this particular fire. There were exceptions, of course. A few former collaborators, speaking anonymously, indicated that they had always sensed that the business arrangements surrounding Dolly's empire were more complicated than the public understood. One veteran industry figure, who declined to be named, said simply that when you build something that big and keep it that private for that long, you create vulnerabilities. That's not a criticism of Dolly, that's just reality. What the investigation means for Nashville more broadly is a question the industry is not ready to answer publicly. But it is absolutely the question being asked privately, in offices and over dinners, and in the kind of quiet conversations that happen between people who understand that the business of country music has always had a shadow side, that the rhinestone and the cowboy hats are specifically designed to distract you from looking at. Dolly Parton was, in many ways, the purest and most beloved symbol of everything country music wants to be. Hardworking, humble in origin, wildly talented, generous, funny, real. If the investigation reveals that her estate was victimized by people who exploited that image and that legacy for their own gain, the anger in this industry is going to be something to behold. And if it reveals something more complicated than simple victimization, well, Nashville is going to need a lot of time to process that. A lot of time. What happens now? Here is where things stand as of right now. And I want to be straight with you because you deserve a straight answer even when the straight answer is frustrating. The investigation is ongoing. Federal investigations of this complexity do not resolve quickly. They involve mountains of financial documentation. They involve interviews with dozens of witnesses. They involve the kind of painstaking, methodical forensic accounting work that takes months and sometimes years to complete properly. Anyone who tells you they know exactly how this ends right now is either guessing or lying. What we do know is this: the assets of Dolly Parton's estate are currently subject to various legal proceedings. The Dollywood operation continues to function because it has its own management infrastructure and its own financial obligations to employees and partners that do not pause for legal disputes. The Imagination Library also continues operating because the people running its day-to-day programs are committed to protecting the mission, even while the larger questions get sorted out. Good on them, honestly. Those books still need to get mailed. The intellectual property, which is the crown jewel of everything Dolly built, sits at the center of the most contested legal questions. Who controls the publishing catalog? Who has the right to license her music? Who can authorize the use of her name and image? These are questions worth arguing over in court because the answers are worth an enormous amount of money. The right answer also matters to millions of fans who want to know that Dolly's songs and Dolly's image are being stewarded by people she actually would have chosen. Carl Dean, her beloved husband, has remained as private in widowhood as he was in marriage. Whatever role he plays in the resolution of these matters, it will not be a public one. That much you can count on. And somewhere in all of this, there are investigators who are still working, still examining documents, still following the money through the complicated channels where it traveled during the final years of a remarkable life, looking for the truth about what happened inside an empire that the woman who built it spent decades making sure nobody could see all the way into. The question of whether they will find what they are looking for and whether what they find will lead to accountability is one that does not yet have an answer. What does have an answer is the simpler question underneath all of it, the question of who Dolly Parton was and what she built and what it meant. She was a girl from a Tennessee holler who paid her way into this world with a bag of cornmeal. She became one of the greatest songwriters in the history of American music. She built an empire from nothing, and she gave enormous amounts of that empire back to the region and the people who shaped her. She made children who had never been given a book feel like somebody cared whether they learned to read. Whatever investigators find, whatever the courts ultimately decide, whatever names end up attached to whatever findings come out of this process, none of that changes what Dolly Parton actually was. But it may change what happens to everything she left behind, and for the millions of people who loved her, that matters. It matters a great deal. The story of what the FBI found inside Dolly Parton's estate is not finished yet, not by a long shot. And we are going to keep following it because the truth about what happened to one of the country music's greatest legacies deserves to be told completely, whatever that truth turns out to be. If you want to stay on top of every development in this story as it unfolds, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell right now. And let us know in the comments. Did this change how you think about Dolly Parton's legacy? Or does the woman herself remain untouchable to you, no matter what comes next? Drop your thoughts below, because this conversation is just getting started.